What do you do when a student writes a great, insightful answer, but it doesn't answer the exact question?
Well, he may be doing it because he doesn't know the answer to the question as asked. You know what comes to my mind right away is, and I've often said this to students in class, because they'll say, what are you looking for? And over again, I would say, like for an exam question or an essay, I would say, I am looking for thinking on a piece of paper. I'm looking for thought, and I'm looking for your ideas, of course relative to the question that's asked. It almost has to be that you're there with that paper in front of you, with that student's name. That may be that student's style too. And it may be politely saying, sir, you've asked the wrong question. What good? I think that would often occur either from someone who's a consummate con man or someone who is very, very intelligent. What good are 100 answers if we haven't asked the right question? I actually have a theory called IQ 5, and it's that IQ that we always think of as mathematical. And then the next one I have is called IQ imaginative quotient. And we know what that is. The person goes way off base, but it's brilliantly done. And then I have one called inquisitive quotient. That's the student that still waters run deep. He speaks twice all year, and both times he asks the right question. And then you have invitational quotient. That's the kid that always knows your name, is always smiling. It's the life of the party on Friday night. You know, he invites you in. It's a wonderful quality for a teacher to have. You know, hey, hi Jamie. Students come in, you speak to them, you're pleasant, and you give them energy. They want to come into your class.
What do you do when a student is terrified to present to the class an oral presentation?
Very early in my career, it was about, say, my 4th year of teaching, a boy, I'll just call him Frank. He's a great big guy. He was grade 9, about 6 feet tall even in 9, great basketball player. They had to give a 5-minute speech. We had it all set up. And he came up to me after school and said, sir, I can't do the speech. Not that I don't want to do it. And I said, why, Frank? And he said, well, it's because I stutter. And I said, oh, I really haven't noticed that. He said, oh yeah, you have. You hear me stuttering. And I said, well, I don't know, maybe. I don't know, I just haven't known. But so you're afraid that, he says, well, I'm afraid I'll get up there and I said, I want to do it on Wales. And he says, I'll get up there and I'll say, bye, toppy. And I said, well, have you got it written out? And he had it there. He even said, imagine. Maybe this helped me in knowing what to do, because the young teacher said, I even have it memorized. And I said, you know what I think we should do? You get me a copy of it and give it to me, and then get another copy and give it to someone, which I already told them to do, in the front seat. And if you forget what you're supposed to say, they can cue you. But what do you say, both you and I sit on the desk at the front, on my desk? And he said, yeah. And I said, you start out the speech, and I'll have your speech. I won't be able to get it memorized, but I'll have your speech right in front of me. And if you start to stutter, I'll just take over. And I looked at it and I said, like you may say, whales are, and he said, also, and he started to stutter then, even in class or after school. And I said, I'll just take over. And you know what, it worked. But it started out, and he got the first sentence out, and he started to stutter. And our agreement was that I'd take over and do the whole speech if I had to. I just read the next sentence, and I said, if I start going on, speech goes on, show must go on, Frank, show must go on. And I said, as soon as you feel like jumping in again, he jumped in about after I got 6 or 7 words out, and he just flowed through the speech But if a student really has a problem with that, you got to be careful. And as soon as they say something, I'll forfeit my 10 marks rather than get up in front of the class. I'm not that type. I would make exceptions. And I've had luck with that. That was the only so-called stutterer I've had. I have other kids who didn't want to do it. I've even allowed people to deliver their speech from their desk rather than standing up in front of the class. I mean, it is public speaking, you should go up front, but big deal. That person's problem was, whatever it was, just,
Do you use checklists or rubrics, or do you have a preference?
I don't prefer either. Now, I have a whole bunch of rubrics, and I have checklists for everything. How to mark a verbal visual essay, a rubric for literary cards, a la hockey or baseball cards, rubric for a book of poetry. None of them work for me, and even if they did work, but I have them to show anybody that wants to know, even if they did work, I don't have time. I don't know what other people are doing. I don't have time. If I have 100 student poetry books to go through, all I can do is show respect for the poems and read them carefully and have a sensitive heart, I can't tell you where the points are in a car. I don't know what the manifold is. I can hardly change a light bulb. But you know what? I can mark essays. I'm not a neurosurgeon. I can't even take a good slap shot. I foul out of every basketball game I play, but I can evaluate. Why? Because I'm a teacher. Because I do it. I know what I'm doing. And the biggest thing is this: you don't have time. Can I tell you a little story? And we all, as teachers, make this mistake. I think it was OSSTF had a great little booklet out on what's called conferencing, which is just a euphemism for what? Talking, being present to the student, talking, conferencing. And it was for their independent study project, or culminating project on their novel. And they were going to start out on it, and I had assigned all their novels ahead of time, and I started calling them up a week later to see how it was going. And I had this OSSTF, or whatever the federation was, checklist, which looked pretty good, of things I should check off when I have a conference with the students. You know what I did? First guy came up. I forget his name. How could I remember it? I was more conscious of my checklist. I don't even think I looked him in the eye. And then he sat down and I called the next person out. And I remember saying out loud in class, because someone looked up, they were reading their novel and said, "Is everything okay, sir?" I had said something like this: "This is stupid!" And I, thank God, I came to my senses. I took the checklist and I threw it in the garbage. And then the next guy's there, Stephen, whoever it is, and I said, "What novel did I assign you?" And he said, "You assigned me The Grapes of Wrath." "Thank you, sir." And I said, "Oh, good." He said, "No, you said it was one of your favorite novels." And I said, "Well, how's it going?" He said, "Well, I don't have a copy of it." So I said, "Well, you know what?" I reached back into the cupboard behind me and I said, "I got some extra copies here." "You don't have a copy?" He said, "Oh no, I'm glad I got it and I'm going to read it." And I said, "Here," I forget his name, Stephen was it? I said, here, take this. Now I wonder, and I called the guy up that I had just, and he did have a novel, he was well into it. I think his book was Ayn Rand's We the Living. And he said, "I can't put it down." And I said, "I couldn't when I read it either." But I didn't even know what novel. You see, I wasn't being present to the person. Now that's rubrics at work. But why did I say this is stupid? Because it was rude. I should have been talking to them or saying, "How's it going?" And there were, out of the 30, there were about 8 didn't even have a novel yet. Well, the big thing is this: that's where you're going tonight. You got to get a novel. Go to the library. I haven't got any money. They're not going to charge anything for it.
Is there a way to teach a split class without giving completely different assignments to each grade?
So one of my daughters had to teach a 5-6 split one year, and she came to me. wondering how to do the assignments, and I could only help her out with the English, the arts portion of it. And my answer was what I imagine I would do right away is I would do exactly the same thing when it comes to that. Like, it doesn't matter if the short story is grade 5 or grade 6. At least get that part of it together for class unity.
How do you set up debates in your classroom?
I used to use the formula of, I didn't do it every year, of, you give the little speech and then there's questioning. I liked that one, and then the rebuttals. The most difficult thing I found about debates was getting the right topic. If you get the right topic where there really is a pro and a con, you're going to have a good debate.
What are some of the qualities of an A work?
An A work would basically be free of errors. It would have good sentence structure. It would have good thematic development. It would have good diction. It would have good everything that you associate with good writing. It's got 3 or 4 spelling errors. It could still be an A. I never met any man or woman, be they 6 or 86, that didn't want to pronounce and spell every word correctly. Nobody can do it. It's basically error-free quality work. And when it blows your mind away, it gets the plus. And when it's a little bit off kilter, you put the minus. And you do the same thing with B and C.
Kids don't take good notes in many classes. Do you have any strategies to help kids take effective
notes? Yes, I teach them how to make notes, as I see it, on the blackboard. For instance, if we were doing a short story, and that's a lot of students, really, they don't know what you want. They don't know how it works. They're good in geometry, they're good in calculus, they're good in all those things that probably you and I aren't too good in or don't understand, but they just can't figure out how literature works or what it's even about. So I would put on the board one day what I call the formula, if it's a short story, it would apply to a novel, even a film. W6, who, what, where, when, why, and who knows all this. And in everything you do in making the notes, really what you're trying to get to is solve for X. Why? What's the theme? What's this artist trying to say? And we are all trying to say something. I also have another expression I used over and over again in class. You learn through your fingertips. You asked me earlier, how do I know when they're learning? You learn through your fingertips means that you have to make notes, you have to write. You can be doing diagrams or arrows or anything, but we learn through our fingertips. So that's very important. Another thing I had to say over and over, and these aren't bad kids, almost every day I'd have to say to certain students, open your notebook. And then the answer that would come back would be, I don't have a pen. I'd say, I have a pen right here for you. Please give it back to me after class, or a pencil. Rather than make a huge deal about it, I'd hand him the pencil. Thank you, sir. Now I had all those people up at the front seats. But they weren't bad, they didn't want to work. And you'll get some students that will say to you, that written assignment on the short story, I know you don't want a lot, but you wanted 2 paragraphs on it. Like, is it okay if I come in after class tonight, because I've read it, that's a good story, sir. Is it okay if I come in and just tell you? And I'd say, well, that'd be interesting if we had the time for it. Oh, I got the time. I said, well, I actually have the time tonight too, but no, you have to write it out. Sir, but that takes so much work. I could just tell you. No, I said, no, you have to write it. They don't want to work,
How do you modify a lesson which includes an activity in which students read aloud in front of the class who have difficulty doing so?
One year I was given 10 students that were called at risk. And And I went to a teacher that already was teaching that type of student, and the best advice she gave me was, she said, at the beginning of the year, make it a policy that if you call upon someone to read, that anybody at any time in class, really except me, because I'm paid to do this, that's what I would tell them, it can say, Mr. Barry exercised the option not to read. Now what she was saying there was, you may have 3 or 4 that can't read, so you don't want to embarrass them. Now the first 2 weeks I read everything and did everything. And I even made the mistake of starting, I stayed with it, I guess it was grade 9 or 10. I started with Julius Caesar. And I read about the first 7 lines, wherefore rejoice, what conquest brings he home to... And I looked out, and then they all had the books open in front of them. 5 and 5, all there, all boys. And I could just see some of them were just looking at me, not meanly, but there was such a blank expression. And I said about the 10th line, I looked up again, I said, I don't get this. They weren't getting it at all. And I actually almost became them. I love Julius Caesar, and I know so many of the speeches even by heart. You not Pompey. Many a times your children in your arms. But I started not to get it, and I said to myself, geez, what do I do? And then I said, this play is about an assassination. Caesar, like he gets assassinated by his best friend Brutus. They used to play poker together on Friday night. That's why it's so horrible. And I said, what I think we should do though is just talk a bit about what assassination is. And they started to talk. Actually, one of them, it helped me right away. One of them said, it wasn't a mean thing. He said, you're quite an old guy. Like, were you there when Kennedy was assassinated? He had heard that, you see. And I said, yeah, I was in my 2nd year of teaching, 1963. I remember we had exams going on at the school. And we talked about that, and then most of it about that. Then I gave them the assignment that night to go home and ask grandmothers, fathers, anybody, do you remember Kennedy's assassination? Where were you? And everybody does, like the 9/11 story. Everybody knows who told them or how they got on that first. And then also I went home that night and I got pictures, the Zapruder pictures from Life magazine, and I had them all up the next day, and they talked, they all had stories, and they had endless questions. And then I went back and I said, let's take a look at scene 2. And I started reading it again, and then I stopped. You see, I realized it wasn't working, so I adapted it. It was about 6 or 7 weeks later before I did this. I was actually playing in a hockey game, an old-timer hockey game, and I got hit on the throat with a stick, and it just took away my voice box, and I had to go in and write on the board. And I wrote on the board, I can't talk, I hurt my throat, and I'm going to have to get some people to read. And I go on to little short stories then. And I wrote on the board, always remember the option, if you don't want to read, just do that. And so I pointed to the first guy. First 4 people read quite brilliantly. I was just afraid to, test it. I wasn't a special ed teacher either, but everything, we had a great class. And sure enough, the 5th person and then the last guy I asked, they exercised the option not to read, and I sort of figured out right away they probably couldn't read. I think you asked me something about adapting to, okay.
No, it's just not, you answered it, not forcing kids to read who don't want to read.
Well, you got to change your tactic because it's not working. What
learning styles are used most often in your class? Visual, auditory, tactile?
I'm big on any learning style that works, but I have always been big on audio, tape. One of the first things I bought when I was a teacher, I was at Commerce, I think, in Ottawa, was a tape recorder. I think my salary was about $400 or $380 a month, and I remember I spent $250 on one of those reel-to-reel tape recorders. I was very big on audio and visuals. Yes, I used a lot of pictures and things around the classroom. And if tactility means using the blackboard and chalk, yes, I believe very much in that. All those teaching styles you call them, are good.
How do you know if a student is learning?
You always know they're learning when they ask questions. The utopia in teaching is when you have everything prepared, you're ready to go, you go in and they've just finished, say it's the story from Cypress Gregory, oh, great story. And before you can ask any of the questions or do any of the things you've planned, there's 28 hands up. And then you know that from tea, all you have to do is say shh, and you just start pointing. And they ask the question, and then I do this with my hand, and someone jumps in and answers it. And when they don't, I try and answer it. That's heaven. The only thing that can happen there that could go wrong is everybody wants to talk. And I have a little clock, it's actually a shillelagh, and I bang it on the desk and I say, remember the rule, in a civilized society, only one person talks at a time. Now, this is great, everybody, okay, and as fast as I can, I say, you're on. And often when that person is talking, might always be a question, I'm pointing to the next person. And that's heaven.
What's one strategy that any teacher, regardless of subject, should use to make their classroom a more nurturing learning environment?
I would say put the student first. The student is king. Try to see the learning process, all the things that high school are, being 14, 15, 16, 17. Try to remember what it was like for you and have that type of empathy for things, I think a teacher needs three things. And I'll call them the 3 C's. But all 3 of these aren't going to start with C, but let's pretend they do. You need confidence. You need knowledge. You have to know your stuff. And you need caring. And I think the most important strategy, just like being a good coach, is caring. Caring for your players, You don't have to care for the opposition, except that they don't get hurt. But caring, and students see that. Now that may not be a strategy, but it's something that's very fundamental. You know how you hear kids say, she's fair, or he's tough, but he's a good guy. So often they use that word fair, and or I don't think they would say this way. At least you hear it more when you're driving kids to hockey games and stuff, talking. Someone saying he cares. They don't say it that way, but you can tell that what it means is that the guy's in touch with us. So that's a strategy. Another strategy I think is very important in all subjects. Again, I could be completely wrong, but it worked miracles for me. Stay at the front of the room. Don't be afraid to teach.
How do you think media should be used in the classroom?
It has to be used judiciously and when it creates a learning moment. And it takes a while to get good shorts or docudramas, or over the years as a teacher, you just gather good things. I've always been a little bit worried about the idea that school's over at 3 o'clock and here I am showing them a movie. In other words, I'm plugged in and then they're home at 10 after 3 or 3:30, depending on where they live, and they're instantly plugged in. And they don't today. with the whole iPodism. You don't even have to be home. You're plugged in the moment you walk out of the classroom. And I've always felt that if after school is almost exactly the same electronically as in school, no wonder they're bored. But that's a very individual thing, and what one teacher can pull off or has good resources to, another one doesn't.
How do you make boring material interesting?
There are certain, again, answering within my own discipline, one of the most beautiful novels I ever read was W.O. Mitchell's Who Has Seen the Wind? The death had come to many things Brian O'Connell had known. And finally, at the end, his father, the town pharmacist, dies. I cannot teach that novel. I've only done it twice, and it failed both times. It won't teach. It gets boring for them, and it just doesn't work. I can't make it interesting. And I've had other teachers tell me that. I have also had certain classes where the preponderance of the students, they weren't that good at reading or being into at least the academic side of literature, and I could not make the novel, even though it was sort of interesting. I couldn't make it work, so again I learned to resort to short stories. Their attention spans or something were such that if we could do it in class and handle it all right there, it would take away that boredom quotient. I'm really not sure how to answer that. I left teaching history because we had to teach 6 weeks on civics. I was probably wrong, but I was convinced I couldn't make civics interesting, you see. I just didn't know how to make City Hall and the mayor interesting.
How do you make students feel like what they are learning matters to their lives?
We assume sometimes that things have to be relevant. We have to enter their world. Don't do that. They don't want you to do that. They don't want Mr. Cohen to be their best friend. They don't even want you to be their father. They want you to, you're the teacher, And they'll argue tooth and nail against you or with you in class, and then you'll hear on parents' night that the students at home, at the dinner table, he's preaching the gospel of James Cohen, saying all the things you believe. And what's he bringing to school often? He argues to the nth degree with his father, and that's the thing about being teenagers. Youth to itself rebels, though none else be near. That's what Shakespeare said in Hamlet. I think it was Hamlet. And that's just the way they learn. It often looks like they're being a little bit obnoxious or rude, but they can only learn by taking that position. So you tell them what you believe.
How do you address a class if someone says something derogatory to a group of people?
Oh, any racial type of thing, you call it. And it can sometimes be a learning experience. Perhaps if I did make a mistake, I may have reacted too strongly physically. It was always with a boy, never with a girl. I've never had a girl say anything like that to me, or say anything like that in class. That's all I can tell you. I think you'll know what to do. I remember once teaching Merchant of Venice, and I wasn't even sure I knew this. Someone first asked me the term about, does Shylock mean like money grubber or something, I think I probably said, I never thought of that. And then someone said, all Jews are money grubbers or something. And I said, no. I tried to treat it academically. I said, no, you don't make generalizations. Plus I said, Shakespeare, unquestionably, his time was anti-Semitic, and he may have been anti-Semitic, but I said, look at the way this play is going. He seems to feel pity for Shylock. He has Shylock saying, hath not a Jew eyes and ears? if you void your room upon my beard, you don't think it hurts me? I think Shakespeare was honestly trying to do something about it. So you just, you do your best, but boy, that's when you earn your stars, when you handle that right, and you will handle it right.
How do you deal with a student who constantly interrupts?
You have to find out what's going on there. I'm not sure I've ever solved that, but you do have to call the person aside. And you've probably seen it could almost happen, keep going for 70 minutes. They jump in and answer the questions out of turn. Well, you have to say, hey, we'll be back to you in about 5 minutes. And I've tried things like, look, you know your stuff, and you're jumping. I don't want everything to jump to that conclusion that fast, because solving for X means it's all over. So many of these discipline and behavioral things, you have to be caught in the exact moment at the exact time, and just the instinct of your heart, and you seem to do the right thing.
How would you deal with a student who is perpetually late for class?
Well, like when I would really notice it usually is in the first period of the day. That's when the most tardiness occurs, right? It isn't in the second and third, because getting through the halls and getting to class, and you're busy, you're not even getting started right away, and they keep filtering in. But if it occurs over and over in the morning, first of all, I'm talking about not being 10 or 15 minutes late, but 20 seconds, 30 seconds. And if I see people coming, first of all, if the national anthem or a prayer or something starts, I'm doing that. Stop. You're not late. You stop wherever you are when the national anthem's on. And then when it's over, rather than closing the door, and then when they come saying, you're late, go to the office, I just stand there. And I say, you gotta try and get here on time or something, or, perpetually late. Well, if someone comes in 20 minutes late, then I just say, I put my hand out for the late slip. I don't even have to say anything. No, I didn't go to the office. We got to get a late slip, That's late. I've always had the position, I try never to make my classroom or teaching adversarial. And any of that type of stuff, and the teacher beside you, he's not wrong. Usually math or physics or something. You hear, you're late! You're 1 second late! Go to the office. First of all, if I send them to the office, they probably sit on the bench for half. They miss the class.
How do you deal with discipline issues without giving detention?
Oh, that's a good one. I do give detention, and we call it a jug in our school. And I usually go to my room, right? It's easier if the school has a detention room, especially if it's serious. But often, well, I'm in there teaching as the school ends, and I say, come and see me. Detention! Jug! And then when they come in, 90% of the time, there are infractions where they stay till 6 o'clock, the person deserves it. But I would say, you know what? I don't deserve this detention. Why should I have to stay here for 40 minutes? You know what you said was completely out of place and absolutely rude. Sir, I'm sorry. And then I say, and often they do, because they sort of, and I do said, I'm sorry. And I'd say, okay, look, it's not fair for me to stay here 40 minutes, is it? Because you did that. He said, no, I'm sure I am sorry. And I said, okay, look, we're both going home. And it's in talking, you can just sense. Other times, even though it was serious and I should really keep the person, I'd talk a bit like that, and then I would still let them go unless I could send them to a universal detention room somewhere, just because I hadn't had my lunch, or I had to go and coach, or I was just too damn tired I just had to go to the bathroom. Now maybe I was copying out, but hey, listen, it's my classroom. I'll do it my way, and I won a lot of kids over. forget the whole spiel I would give, but anyway.
How do you deal with the student who is a rude or inappropriate class clown?
Keep them close to you. That's where you change the seating plan, and involve them in as much stuff as you can. Even if there's fish in the room, he feeds the fish. If anybody has to take anything to the office, he takes it to the office. If you send people to the blackboard, you always send him. He's part of the class clown because he's just got all this energy, and but they can drive you a bit crazy.
What's your opinion on homework?
I think there should be homework. I think you have to be very careful not to give too much, and it should be very structured. They should know exactly what they are to do. And I think the most important thing is like fairness, not giving too much.
What's your opinion on bullying?
Oh, bullying is just one of the most horrible things that exists, and it's amazing how many people actually have experienced bullying. I always tended to think it was more prevalent in elementary school, and it probably is, because there's more fragility there among some of the students. I think if a student comes to you and tells you that, now you might be able to handle it yourself, but there's a case where you should go either with the student right then and there to guidance, or you should certainly tell guidance the next day so that they can do something about it. And all you have to do is listen. You don't have to be a great father confessor, and just listen. He just needs to talk to someone.
What's your main advice for new teachers based on what you've learned over the past 40 years as a frontline teacher?
Well, first of all, it's worthwhile. If you've taught for 40 years and you have made a difference in one student's life every second year, 2 into 40 is 20, that's a pretty meaningful life. Something you've said or done or the way you've treated that person has altered the course of their life. Another thing I've learned is to be very suspicious. I had this quite early, not early enough, of governments and people who mouth off and make big fancy statements about education who don't do it. A lot of people who create these guidelines and things that sort of get in your way, think of it. If they haven't had a child graduate from grade 8 or high school, they haven't been in a school in 25 years. If they've had a couple of graduations, they've been there twice. You and I were there yesterday, this afternoon in fact. And we don't know it all. We're shaky. Something else I've learned, teenagers never change. They're always the same. And why would they change? And I've learned there's a beautiful bond between, well, actually, you were one of my students, and that's just special to me. I hope it works the other way, that he was my teacher, you know. That'll never change. They're desperately trying to change it in some of the universities with these online courses. If you can only teach people in Hudson Bay or James Bay, well, yeah, it's a good thing. But education is a personal thing. It should be face to face.
What are some assignments, Jim, that are labor intensive for the student, but are easy and fun to mark, and work? They just work.
Well, I could explain some of these things I have here on the desk. These assignments, I created these more as the computer revolution steamrollered across the educational system. And well, I remember starting to worry about all my Macbeth essay topics, 32 good essay topics, because the students are always on this before us, telling me that they could get their whole essay somewhere on the internet. I guess they paid a good dollar for it. And I realized a lot of my Macbeth topics were the ones that were on there because they were good topics and other teachers had them. So I thought, geez, I better take a slightly different tact here for the assignment I give relative to that place. So I set aside or threw out my essay topics and started coming up with new ways of doing things. One of the things I did was, and this was an assignment I gave right at the end of May. They were to create a set of literary cards for Hamlet. Now, this could have been a set of literary cards for any novel. It could be in mythology, it could be in other subjects. And what they had to do there was just like hockey or baseball cards, having a visual on one side and then a write-up on the other side. Could be the theme, could be the characters, could be the ghost in Hamlet, whatever. Then they would package it neatly and slickly, just like in the real world. Hopefully I'd tell them they put a little bit of gum in there for me, which the card companies really don't do anymore. All of these assignments are short. They can't be done by the computer. They can only be done by the student and his or her imagination. And they basically work from the premise of one piece of paper. Now you could easily, in any of them, incorporate more pieces, especially gifted classes and things. But these are the publishing sizes, you see. This is folio size. And probably one of the best things I ever created was the idea of what's called the verbal visual essay. It's the magazine size. And they do a 2-page spread. This particular one is, I don't have my glasses, this is on The Great Gatsby, the novel. On the front here there are 10 verbals. 5 of his or her own statements about the novel and 5 quotes, and then visuals that try to get at the gist, the essence, the something of the book. Gatsby pursued money, you see the dollar bill. Then you turn it over. There are the 5 quotes, there are the 5 personal observations, and there's the person writing an explication of what is here. There's only one person in the world that can write that. The fellow who put all this together, telling you why he did it. I call all of these things media constructs or business world projects. If I give out an essay, which I do, literary essay on something, 30 students, I might get 26 of the essays in. Give out the verbal visual essay, almost invariably, you told me you did it. Everybody turned it in. They were in on time and they loved doing it. And it's only that boy there can write that about Bernard Malamud's The Natural. And he knows why he sets it up that way, you see. All right, then you fold the sheet once and you have our next size in publishing, which is quarto size. That's the size of all books. I use this when I get them to create their own, and I've done this every year since 1971. I wish I'd done it earlier. Their own personal book of poems. They write 10 poems of their own. And it works. Now the next size you can create, and probably the best one I use all the time, is, well, this is octavo size, see, like this. But you do it once more. What's good about this is they don't have a name for this. So I created the term sestissimo, 1/16. And when I assign it, here it is, like the mini novels for Mice and Men, fits perfectly. Just cut it around with the scissors. You can use a staple. If you want, you could use more pages. And the only thing that's different when you create your mini novel is It doesn't say Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. It says, let's get a couple here. They changed the title and the author. Dreamland by Lawrence. Across the River by The Good and Crazy Giant. Companions United. I Want Rabbits. The Great Dream by Jason. It's labor intensive for them, but not for me. It's a piece of cake, you know. And I use a 5-star system. I used to write in them, but now I don't do that anymore. And it just works. Rubrics. What is it an exercise in? How does it fit the guidelines? Creating a mini novel. Can't get it from the computer. You're the only one that can do it. It's an exercise in reading, in comprehension, in précis, synopsis, in sentence writing, in creative thinking, in making connections between art and writing. And it's making a print media product. It's real world. They'll ask me, does it have to have pictures or visuals? And I'd say no. It probably won't get a better or worse mark because it has pictures. It's just a great little assignment, and it just seems to restore your spirit. So they just retell the story. The biggest problem I have is getting them to write in the present tense, the immediacy of the moment. And for anybody that says it's a Mickey Mouse assignment, any of these, do one. And right away you'll say, geez, that was hard. Was it fun? Did I spend too much time at it? Yes. Did I get a good mark in it? Yes. Why is it difficult? At the same moment as you're writing the first sentence of your mini novel about weathering, you have to in your mind be writing the last sentence. Because you can only choose so many sentences, and you want to tell the basics of the story. Now let's just do a couple more. We can do this quickly. This is the latest one I've created. Again, just one sheet of paper, turned like this. I use this now for Shakespeare in lieu of those essays that they can get so easily by copying. I just don't want to go through all that nonsense of trying to figure out. And I know you can scroll those words in and they'll tell you. But they do a timeline. So they fold it this way, you see. And here is, this is from a teacher in Cape Breton sent me. I have very few of these. That's, what is it? Julius Caesar. So 5 of these, the well-named play of Shakespeare, 5 acts. On the front, some graphics and quotes, and you just set up what you want them to do. And then on the back, they have to encapsulate the whole play in terms of whatever you want them to write. And it's amazing, they do it. To do this, every time you go through a different act in the play, you have to be making notes, you have to write things down, so that's time frame size. If you take that same sheet and you turn it this way, you end up with pamphlet size. Now I'm setting up one here for, it's a response to a film. But they only have this much space. They can have endless notes. Victor Hugo said, I didn't have time to write a short letter. You have to really think and just be your own person. Or I also use this, oh no, if you do it this way, yeah, 3 times, you end up with brochure size. So they read a novel and then they select 15 words in the novel they don't know and they put down the meaning of the word, and they have to use the sentence it was found in the novel, or they'll never take ownership of the word. And then just dress up a little stick junk mail brochure that's coming into the house on your 15 words. All that's special about this is, if it's me doing it, I have to call it 15 Jim words, 15 Ivana words, 15 Monica words, 15 Nancy's words. You just have to use your name. Just endless types of assignments that grow out of a creative approach. And it's a joy for you to mark. It's so easy in your day mark. Almost everybody's getting A and B, but what delights me even more is they're doing it. And I know they're not copying it, and it's just interesting, and they like it. And of course the question often becomes, why can't we do another verbal visual essay instead of the regular literary essay? Well, no, it's customary to do one, but we don't need two. We only need one. We can do a lot of real world stuff. Most important thing of all is to say, and I've given workshops across the country and showed all this stuff to teachers, and of course they go and do it, and it changes a lot of things in their classroom. But the question asked over and over is it okay to do that? Imagine, is it okay to do a verbal visual essay? Is it okay to break out of the mold, to break out of the box? Is it okay to do something that the kids like to do? Look at that little book of poems that student turned in. Here's the world's smallest mini novel. Used to be this one. That's The Old Man and the Sea. And this is Marquez's Chronicle of a Death Foretold. He changed the title to There's Blood. No, it's Kamouraska by Annie Bear. There's blood on the snow in Kamouraska. I get excited as the teacher. The student gets excited. Some of these people haven't been doing anything anyway, and it's often the first thing they truly did from their own creative heart. So the question becomes to the teacher, is it okay if I do that? Yes, it's okay. Close the door and do the job. Nobody else really cares deep down. Students care, parents care, and principals. Myself or you teaching beside me, we care deeply. I can't get any time to go into your class. I don't know anything about your class. My job's with my students. Yes, it's okay. And everything the government asks you about rubrics and all that, say yes, of course I'm doing that. You are. That's what you're doing. You just don't have time to talk about